Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books Author Reading Series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real live bookseller, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
Today, of course, we are absolutely delighted to have Anne Gisleson discussing the Futilitarians. My goodness, what two words I just totally said. Here, discussing with Matt Sumell. And Matt Sumell is a hotshot local LA writer, an Irvine grad, author of Making Nice. We had a big event for him for that book. He's been published in Paris Review, One Story, Electric Literature, all over the place. Anne Gisleson is out with her first book, and boy, the book couldn't have come at a more timely moment while we are like beset on all sides by natural disasters and man-made disasters, and we're having this like intense emotional cultural reckoning, and here we are with the books. I'm just like her. I think the books are what are going to save us. So it's really like an absolute pleasure to get to host an event here at the store for such a book. My goodness, it has gotten so well reviewed. It has been called grand, complex, shattering, compassionate, important, beautiful, existential, boozy, brilliant, tragic, deeply affecting, brave, intellectual, wonderful, profoundly moving, personal, unexpected, universal, playful, occasionally triumphant, intense, intimate, charming, captivating, and a great book. Let's please give her a warm round of applause.
Okay. Sure. Well, thank you so much. Thanks so much, and thanks for Skylight for having me out here. Do I need this? Do I need this, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll make it just right, please. Sit down and
okay.
put it just right.
All right.
Ooh. Here we go. Is that good? Better.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that a nice introduction. Slightly embarrassing introduction, all the hyperbolic words, descriptors. I'm just going to do a really quick overview of the book. And first of all, it's so great. Just like almost everyone I know in LA, which not that many people, are like actually here, which is wonderful. One person in particular I need to recognize because I was totally mortified. I don't know if this happened to you when when it came time to do the acknowledgments for the book. And you had to think about like everybody who influenced you or had a hand in the book in some way. And as I was writing, I was like, I know I'm going to mess up. I'm going to miss somebody. I'm going to miss somebody. I'm going to miss somebody important. And then as soon as I got my copy, I was like, it was Aunt Karen. Yes, I totally should have put you in there because you were so fantastic in filling a lot of blanks for my dad. My father is he's prominently part of this book. And I remember I emailed you some questions and you sent me this wonderful response, filling in like all these like details of my dad as a kid and growing up. And I remember thinking at the time, like, I have to remember to put Karen in that. So I'm sorry, but in the next edition, there's another edition. You'll be in the.
There will be.
Yeah, you'll be in the acknowledgments. So thanks so much, Aunt Karen. So just a really quick overview of the book. It takes place over the year 2012, and it was the beginning of January. We decided to start an existential crisis reading group among some friends. Strangely enough, one of the original members from the meeting, Nina, happens to be in LA, and it takes place in New Orleans, so it's kind of extra strange that you happen to be here, and she has a very important role in the book. You can come up a few times, but especially the mythology of the group and what happened. You'll have to buy the book and read it to find out exactly what happens. But anyway, so we start this existential crisis reading group, and literally like the next day, my dad, who wasn't part of the group, but he had been sick at the time, he had just had a week of chemo, he drives up to Angola State Prison to visit his client on death row. He had no immunity, zero immunity, and he ends up getting very ill and dying the next week. And so it's this year's worth of readings of the groups, like the discussions of the group, and dealing with family issues and grief and my dad's death, and death row plays a prominent role in it because I ended up going up there and visiting with the men up there. So So that's just kind of the groundwork for the book. And so it's 12 chapters. Each month is a different chapter. And I'm going to read a little bit of March, which kind of connects somewhat to your intro, too. And this is called The Belly of the Whale, March. On the morning commute to my younger son's school, we'd sometimes pass a bar, a 24-hour joint, which would often have the door propped open to the daylight. The threshold framed a patron on a stool, usually an older guy, maybe smoking, who had either been there all night or was starting very early. Behind him, redly glowing light fixtures on the low ceiling, the jittery screens of video poker machines, that sweet dread touch of Christmas lights strung above the bottles. Unused cash registers with neat squares of rags covering the buttons, George Jones in the jukebox back by the pool table. Sometimes we'd get stuck in traffic in front of that bar and watch one of the patrons gazing outside. I'd wave, and one of the guys would wave back. Once my son asked why I do that, wave, and I said, I'm just saying hi. Then I thought to myself, saluting the tragic plane on the way to kindergarten drop-off. Because of our March ECRG, that's the Existential Crisis Reading Group, reading an excerpt from Arthur Koestler's 1964 opus, The Act of Creation, I had become attuned to life's tragic and trivial planes. In The Act of Creation, which explores the nature and purpose of creativity in life, novelist/journalist/ anti-death penalty activist / double suicide Koestler outlined what he believed are the two essential planes of existence, the trivial and the tragic. The trivial is where most of us spend a great deal of our lives, doing the work of survival and civilization, repetitive labor, commuting, running errands, and general life maintenance. In the trivial plane, we are held down by the grip of convention, and the possibility of self-transcendence diminishes. We experience the tragic plane when we fully connect to metaphysical forces like love, despair, and death. But if we spend too much time in the quote-unquote belly of the whale, which tends to disrupt all logical operations, we become lost. The Koestler reading was chosen by Tristan, born on a barge in an Amsterdam canal. That's one of the ECRG members. Every month somebody would choose a different reading. Chosen by Tristan, born on a barge in an Amsterdam canal, a former bookseller and editor and now carpenter. Along with the National Guard, he'd been one of the first people to show up at dawn at a drawing marathon the nonprofit Brad, Susan, Case, and I helped start in a warehouse by the railroad tracks in the art-starved city after Katrina. A stranger to us, he stayed most of the 24 hours, even helped clean up the huge mess the following morning. He's been a steady partner in projects and a generous friend ever since. That evening, he described how about 10 years ago, he'd taken a 6-month job in Antarctica, painting the walls of the McMurdo Station, an American research center. The average temperature was always below zero, and there were only a few hundred people there, who were always cloaked in white suits against the white walls atop the white continent. He said the sensory and emotional isolation was intense, but that he learned to recognize fellow workers by their gestures and gait, an industrious band of ghosts whose moods he could sense by the way they held a paintbrush or traversed the camp. When he finally went on leave to Christchurch, New Zealand, he was so overwhelmed by the intensity of daily life, the colors, the sounds, the expressions on people's faces, that he felt like a newborn baby, experiencing everything for the first time, wandering the town near tears. Koestler posited that both the tragic and the trivial planes are necessary to live a fully engaged life, and that each plane can only be truly grasped through contact with the other. The seam, or tightrope, between them is where human creativity, whether personal, artistic, or scientific, exists. While the tragic plane feeds our minds and souls, the trivial plane provides the necessary social and intellectual stability needed to create and function. There's something to be said for putting a name to a condition, a certain comfort in common recognition. After reading the Koestler piece, I started evaluating my days in terms of the tragic and the trivial, how much time I spent on either plane. I could have charted it out like an EKG reading. In the morning, on trivial lockdown, getting everyone fed, ready, and where they needed to go. Late morning, if I was writing, I checked in with the tragic. Early afternoon, at work teaching, the planes were interlocked. Afternoon, safely back on the trivial with pickup, homework, and dinner. Though often around 5 o'clock, it's like someone walks up and hangs an anvil around my neck, which maybe explains the universal cocktail hour. Then everyone shuffles sleepily towards nighttime oblivion. With enough luck and self-medication, no night terrors at 3 in the morning. But there are always places in life where these dichotomies fall apart. For me, it's caring for my children and husband, when affection breaks through the chores, times when making dinner and folding laundry also feel like love. At March's ECRG, we talked about how difficult it is to negotiate the planes. Like when you're, say, shopping at Target, but deep in some anxiety or despair, and you run into an acquaintance who asks how you're doing, and you can only smile and lie, white-knuckling the edge of the trivial plane. We talked about how some people we know seem to firmly inhabit one or the other, about people we'd lost outright to the tragic plane, dragging others down with them for a while. I wondered if Rebecca and Rachel knew, and this is another kind of thread through the book, is that I had two younger sisters who had committed suicide years ago, and my father had forbidden me to write about them, and so with his passing and with the group, it kind of allowed me to start writing about them. So that's like kind of another important strain of the book. I wondered if Rebecca and Rachel knew on some subconscious level that their suicides awarded the rest of us siblings lifetime memberships to the tragic plane. Wondered if spite figured at all into the blackness of those last moments of preparation and descent. Most likely not, but they always seemed so united in their aggrievement. We thought they were spoiled, our tired parents too lax with discipline, with curfews, with money, after already raising 6 children. The twins thought that as the youngest, they were getting the scraps of a big, noisy, energetic family. Kessler wrote that whole communities can be relocated to the gusty, tragic plane, which is what's happening right now in Texas and Florida, through catastrophes like war and natural disaster. We agreed and talked about how after Katrina, it was extraordinary to live in a city where people were so blasted open and vulnerable, charged with frustration and purpose. For the first year, it was a town without small talk, everyone eager to connect with each other, sit and share their sad, crazy tales. So much work and worry. People seemed exhausted all of the time. In addition to all the authentic human interaction, hope, and generosity, this tragic plane was also distinguished by the exodus of friends, the premature loss of many of our elderly, vultures of all stripes, suicide, and divorce. But, Kessler continues, these communities soon succeed in banalizing even tragedy itself and carry on business as usual among the ruins or shambles. Also true. Just 2 months after 80% of the city had flooded and was still mostly empty, my older sister Kristen insisted on celebrating her husband's birthday with a big dinner at a nice French Quarter restaurant, one of the few that had reopened by October. Restaurants 5-star to 1 had limited menus and were serving everything on paper, plastic, or styrofoam because the water system was still wrecked and everyone was understaffed. Kristen couldn't abide that, despised drinking wine out of plastic. So she brought her own case of wine glasses to the restaurant for us to drink from, and then took them home to wash them herself. That night, Brad and I were sitting next to a man I'd known for years, who had lost his father, house, and job during Katrina. He had a look that had become familiar during that time, a loose, tired quality acquired from your life being mangled and imperfectly reassembled. Wife and children suddenly shoehorned into a small apartment in a part of town you'd never liked, but that hadn't flooded, and working a job you'd never wanted, but that paid. In the tawny glow of the grand dining room of the Bourbon House, our plastic cutlery might have squeaked against the styrofoam plates, just like it did against the containers we lined up for at the Red Cross trucks when we first came back to the destroyed city. But we were toasting my brother-in-law and the strength of our troubled region with my sister's wine glasses, clutching the delicate stems.
That's great. Thank you. So I was really kind of reluctant to take this on because I'm selfish and because I was just in Burning Man dealing with my own existential crisis by doing massive amounts of drugs, crying about exes, as you know. But I just want to start off by thanking you for inviting me to do this. Even though I was reluctant, when I finally sat down to read it, as I've done with other friends and other books and stuff like that, sometimes you read a friend's book and you're like, you find stuff. You have to look for stuff to compliment, and you're sort of digging and you find the things to praise, and you're like, yeah, it's great. It's really good stuff. But this is a book that I ran out of bookmarks with passages that I was marking, and I started using my Uno deck. I just lost a page I was going to use, but it's so fucking good. It's really tremendous work, and it's hard work, and it's hard for a number of reasons. One, I think it's difficult. Writing's always difficult, but I think it's difficult. One, because it seems so. It's obviously so deeply felt. You know, it's a memoir. You're dealing with really difficult material, really painful material. I wrote a book of fiction, but it was based on, you know, some my mother passing away and sort of spiraling out, and it was, you know, it hurt to write it. And I wondered if writing it, do you feel that like writing it, do you have to descend down into that tragic plane, like Kessler, is that how you say his name, was describing? Like, because I felt like writing my book, which took me 10 years, it was, you know, it kind of left me in shambles. Like, I was fucked up and I'm depressed. You like spend hours thinking about some of the worst things that have ever happened, and what effect that might have had on you when you were putting this together.
Well, I think because of the way my days are structured, kind of like in that passage, that I don't have a lot of time to descend down there. And when I do, it would totally like mess me up. If I spent, say, 8 hours working on the book at a time, then that would be it would be hard to kind of pull out of the tragic plane and pull away from that. But a bulk of the book was written kind of at a few hours in the morning, because, you know, I've got a family, and, you know, I've got kids, and I've got a job that I've got to be to at noon, and so I would like go and like just like do a quick deep dive into the depths, and but then it was, you know, the trivial plane would just have to pull me out of it, because I had you know, I had other things that I had to take care of, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so luckily I had that trivial plane, so I didn't get lost in like the belly of the whale. But there were certainly some times, like for long stretches, where I did.
I was just talking to you upstairs about Jess Walter. He was giving me advice once, and he was like, "So Matt, I was telling him about some struggles I had writing," and he was like, "So let me ask you, you know, you're working, you're just writing?" I was like, "I'm just writing," and he said, "You have an apartment, it's just the way you like it. You have everything. You got a nice couch." Yeah. You get a nice, yeah. Your girlfriend's there. You got beer in the fridge. Yeah. He's like, "Yeah. I got fucking kids, man. I got a wife." He's like, "I wake up. I you know, we do breakfast, and then I retreat and I stay up away from them as much as I can, and do the work. And then, but he comes back to the trivial plane.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm not sure how much of that I actually had, but it's really kind of fascinating to me to try to find that balance." And I know we get into this too later in the book. I'd have to find the passage. But what about the role of drinking in that? It was Amos, right?
The Kingsley Amos.
Kingsley Amos section.
Yeah, the metaphysical hangover chapter. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what month that is?
That was August.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's find August.
Yeah, the metaphysical hangover. Thanks to my cousins who took me out last night. I not only have a metaphysical hangover, but like an actual, as he calls, physical hangover.
Well, do you feel like, first of all, possibly alcohol helps you get to that plane, the tragic plane, right? To access it, or at least it does for me. And I think it sort of leaves you raw, and then you can sort of.
Well, that's why you recently quit drinking, right?
Well, it was because Trump won and my girlfriend left. But yeah.
Like it says on the beginning of the metaphysical hangover chapter, it says, "Drinking for better or for worse was an integral aspect of the ECRG project. It marked our place in the several thousand-year-long continuum of people sitting around together, sipping and gazing upon the navel of humanity. It's always interested me that for millennia, humanity has contrived with nature to supply itself with never-ending and varied ways to take the edge off of the condition and to alter individual consciousness, to both connect more easily to others and hopelessly isolate ourselves." And that's kind of part of it. With the drinking, there's always that edge. If you can find that balance where it's helping you connect more easily to others, and kind of like loosen the boundaries of the self, and that's great. But it can also hopelessly isolate ourselves. But then Amos, oh no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, it certainly left me, like, sometimes it feels like it helps, and then other times it leaves you completely disoriented. And sort of unable, you're grasping at, like, yeah, fuck, I don't know, like, to bring you back to that line that you need, right? There was a passage about that the creativity happens on that line, right? Like
and the seam between the trivial and the tragic planes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I found that kind of fascinating, where you have to be right on that seam so you can sort of look at both and call from both.
Yeah, and they have to come in contact with each other. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you have that balance.
I feel like most of the time I do have that balance, but also this was like a communal project.
Right.
Like if I was getting together with myself once a month and drinking all night and thinking about these issues, that would be a different thing altogether. But I was getting together with 12 people or whatever, and we were all connecting to each other, and so I think drinking actually became this sort of ritualistic part of the evening, because everyone would show up with a bottle. We'd kill the bottles. We'd line them up in the same place along the wall, and so it became almost a sacramental thing. Like in a lot of interviews I've done about the book, people ask if it's sort of this kind of secular way of like taking the place of going to church or mass or something like that, and just like the ritualistic aspect of it.
Right.
And so I think drinking probably falls more in that. But the communal ritualistic part. Okay.
I certainly found, I identified with some of the passage on 153, especially, I guess, how grief can sort of bring you or bring you into or force you into that tragic plane. Mm-hmm. In those initial years, some of us siblings retreated more fully into careers, others into family life, extra scrutiny given to the next generation of children for any trace of the twins. Amy, the youngest, once more, after growing up a middle child who was home with the twins during the worst years, felt the most immediate responsibility for them and took them off for an extended sojourn in the grand consolation of the isolation of the Grand Canyon. Unmarried, insecure, and chronically confused, I became paralyzed in my personal life, unable to make good decisions to move things forward. I floundered creatively. I was like, yeah, I got that. That's it. Yeah. So it's good to see that you can pull out. I like that. Oh gosh, I'm just dropping everything all over here. It's all right. It's all the Uno cards. We'll figure it out. All right. Well, I also wanted to start off by apologizing too, because I feel like it's such a powerful book. It's a meaningful book, and I feel like not only am I not a draw for a bigger crowd, but I'm actually a repellent. Like this, you should have standing room only in here. I feel for this. It's tremendous work. So many books are just okay. It's writing to sound like writing. And I also love your attention to language itself. And I think you put it really well. You described it as the 1-2 punch of music and meaning, the poetic import, sort of how your sentences, the rhythms and the artfulness of the sentences. You care about that as much as you care about the information they convey. And this is just sort of a craft question, but that attention to that music. Where do you think you first maybe started to figure that out or learn that? Because that was something that took me a while.
Well, actually that passage that you were quoting was when I first read James Joyce, that story Araby, when I was in high school, and those were the things that I knew how to respond to. But actually, I think it kind of a lot of this goes back that I was when I first started writing, I was a poet, and so I wasn't a poet. I wrote poetry, and I was
You're
kind
a
of
poet, yeah.
and I was I published some poetry, but I probably shouldn't call myself a poet. And so I wrote a lot of poetry, but then I realized, that wasn't my thing. I wasn't really good at that. And so I was kind of a failed poet. But poetry, of course, teaches you, concision and to focus on images and the visuals and the sound, right? So those are the big lessons that you learn from writing poetry. And then I started writing short fiction, and that kind of, once again, you still have to think about concision and the way that the lines move things forward. But then I realized I wasn't a fiction writer either, a short fiction writer. I failed short fiction. And then I wrote a couple of novels, and then I realized I wasn't I wasn't a novelist either. And when I started writing nonfiction, one of the things I loved about it is like, oh, I'm a failed poet and a failed fiction writer, but like with nonfiction, you can use all those things. You can like use the music from poetry and the imagery and all of that, and you can have characters like in fiction. And so, like, I was so relieved. I mean, it took me a long time to figure this out. It took like 20 years or something to figure out, like, you know what I mean, that I wanted to write nonfiction. But that was part of like going through having to fail at all those different things is what kind of brought me to this.
But do you feel like, I don't know, for me, I feel like part of the secret is just having like a stubbornness that borders on diagnosable, where you just don't stop. Like you stopped writing poetry.
Yeah.
If you didn't, you'd be fine. Yeah. How long did this take? This was.
I started writing it about midway through 2012, and I asked the group. I think you were out of it by then. I know. If they were okay, I was like, I think there's enough material. Because after that first meeting, that first like super intense meeting, and then like Dad dying the next week and all of that, I was like, oh my God, and all the things we had read, like Epicurus and Ecclesiastes, and I was like, God, this is such an essay. And so I just wrote this essay about that first meeting, and then like we had the next meeting, and then the next one, I was like, oh, this is something. This is a book. And so about halfway through, I asked the members in the group, I said, y'all cool if I just start writing about this? And they're like, yeah, no problem. And everyone was really nice about it. So I started writing in the middle of 2012, worked on it for maybe a year and a half, and Little Brown picked it up in 2015, and then spent like another year working on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to do math. That's like
That's right.
5 years.
Yeah, well,
Something like that.
it was like 3 years. But I was writing other stuff too. I was writing like magazine pieces and stuff like that.
That's amazing. Yeah, that seems, yeah. My book was like 10 years, more, 12, because one story took me 7 years. It's sort of like I just don't stop.
Yeah.
So anyway, that sensibility really sort of came through in your sentences, that art and that beauty. And it makes sense what you said, because even my mentor, Michelle Atiole, she has an MFA. She gets a lot of praise for that, for being so into the language. It's mouth sounds and sort of just the music of it, and it's like, oh yeah, she got her MFA both in fiction and in poetry. So that's really kind of fascinating to me. Let me think. Well, the first meeting ended with a breakup, right? Yeah, and then followed immediately by your father passing away. Your father was obviously such a huge role. Cast such a huge shadow, and was a tremendously important person to you. And then, did you have any? I mean, did that make this project even more important for you, or were you like, this is a bad sign, like things are fucked up?
I think those were the reasons why I wrote it. There's that sense of urgency and wanting to deal with that. And I think whenever you lose a parent, like that's when all these big issues of mortality and self and existence in your past and trying to figure all this stuff up, that's when these things kind of come up. So for me, it felt like those were the things that made it necessary to write it. Right. Even though it was hard.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I sort of related to that too. The idea of you use what hurts. You take the good luck of bad luck and try to make something of it. But then, it's also a tremendously funny book, and I love that the make them laugh, break the heart kind of thing that happens here, and just like how smart it is. Like from that breakup and from that loss, you move right into grieving during carnival season was an odd enterprise, because February in New Orleans, carnival season starts. Somewhat like grief, carnival's chief tension is between ritual and chaos. And also like grief, it involves breaking out of daily rhythms and getting in touch with something more communal. The season of Carnival, or Farewell to the Flesh, lasts for weeks, from the Feast of the Epiphany to Mardi Gras, or Fat Tuesday. The same parades have been parading in the same nights of the week in the same sequence for years. People have appointed days for throwing and attending certain parties. The same families escape town for the week of Mardi Gras. After all, not everyone enjoys the massive crowds, the traffic, the excess, which you said you don't. Most schools, both Catholic and secular, close for the week, or at least part of it. Regular business is suspended unless your regular business is in the service industry or law enforcement. I mean, I think it's such a really smart metaphor or a comparison to draw Where was I going with this sort of line of questioning? Let me think here. But then in February, you slide into sort of the absurdity of some of this, and the absurdity of death, and sort of had this, like I read it and I had this sense of permission. Like there's one line: frivolity is the refusal of the human species to suffer. And it felt like I was happy to read that, because oftentimes I guess I've been called an ass who knows he's an ass and who tries not to be an ass but is still triumphantly an ass. Like I'm like, I want to look at everybody and be like, you're welcome for being an ass. You know what I mean? I'm just refusing to be, suffering. But all this is so smart, and then. You go into this stuff about, I mean, what I found really fascinating in this February month is the Lego stuff.
Oh, yeah.
At one point, your son, is it Otto? Because of your father's passing away, gives you a cross, a green cross, crucifix made out of Legos.
Yeah.
But then you also, I'm not sure when it happened exactly in the timeline, but there was a Nazi Lego guy.
Yeah, the whole, I think, like part of it, you're right, that is a very absurd chapter. And I think like when you're, Dad just died and everything, and I think you become like really, really attuned to absurdity, like absurdity in life and absurdity in death. And and I mean, the Lego part of that is that, he had given me this little Lego cross, but of course it, like everything, it just kind of ended up in the chaos and the confusion of everything. But that whole like Lego thing is that he was asking for a Nazi Lego minifigure, and he was 5 at the time, and he didn't even know what Nazis really were. It was just like another little kind of action figure. And so hearing him like say the word Nazi, I was just like, whoa, what? And I was like, they don't really have those. He's like, yeah, they totally have them. Like you can get them online. And we happened to be reading a story called This Way to the Gas, Ladies and Gentlemen, which is about the horrors of the Holocaust. It's by this amazing Polish writer, Tadeusz Borowski. And so we were reading about these horrors of the Holocaust. I've got my little kid asking for Nazi Lego minifigures, and so just the absurdity in that. But then like he was looking, like, when you go on YouTube and you put in like Lego things, and you get like there's like millions and millions of videos of all these little like scenarios, like the Nuremberg trials, and like all done in Legos.
Which is nuts.
But there's all this, there's like, like the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear meltdown. They have that in Legos, like the Twin Towers with the plane flying in. Like people
the tidal wave, right?
The tidal wave, but that's like a way that some people kind of process these things, adults, by making Lego things of them. But he was looking up these things, and I heard this terrible song about how and it was like this techno song, and it's like, we like these girls with functioning vaginas. And I'm like, what? And he was tiny, and I just like, I get the mouse. I'm like, what is this? And some dudes had made this a strip club out of Legos, and had a little Lego stripper on a stripper pole.
Oh my God.
And with one leg, and one of the lines was, we don't care if they've only got one leg, as long as they've got a functioning vagina. And I'm just like, this is so like fucked up. Like this is so messed up. But like it was kind of the absurdity of the world we live in, especially like raising kids, like with the internet. I think I'd use the image as iridescent. It can like go shiny and dark with like one click. That's it. Suddenly he's watching this like insane video because he was just like, looking up Legos.
Yeah.
And so the absurdity in that chapter is just, and then there's all the weird biographical stuff with Borowski, who maybe had this affair with a young girl and everything. And so this like meshing of the adult world and the kid world, and then also like one of my sisters had been a dancer as well, and so that figured into like my sort of visceral reaction to the dancer, the little like blonde Lego dancer figure. And so I think there's that part, like, I'm like, how do we get to this place where like my kid, like Legos, like his favorite toy, misogyny, like my sister's suicide, like everything mashes together in this one absurd moment.
Right.
Which seems very contemporary.
About your sister, one of the things that I found sort of really touching, and sort of also the solace that you got from, strangely, like at the end of that chapter, February, was the door of your house, the crack of light over the door.
Oh, the transom, yeah.
The transom.
Mm-hmm.
So it's through the transom, I see. So it's that big thing.
Yeah,
but you just
at the top.
So you got your solace from that. But I became sort of fixated on some of the objects that you assign significance to, meaning to. And one of them was your sister's, when you went to clean up the house or something, the eye makeup. Because it's this thing, you don't use it, right? But there's this significance that you can't get rid of it either, right? And it's something I've been thinking about because I got involved once with this thing called significant objects. Had you heard of it?
Oh yeah, I wrote a piece for that.
You did?
Yeah,
so did I.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
With the Rob Walker and yeah.
Right. Right. Where you take it. The idea is that you take an object that's not worth more than $5 or $10, and you, as what initially happened was they were doing that, and they were saying, like, we got these stories from people of objects that weren't worth financially any money, but that were worth everything to them, and it was these objects that had, meaning like this eyeglass case or this eye makeup case or whatever, and then they decided that they could task fiction writers with writing a little story to give it that meaning, and that's what we were doing, right?
Yeah. No, you know what? I'm thinking about a different object thing. I'm thinking of Project Object, which was a different one.
Oh, it was a
with
different
Rob
one.
Walker. Yeah.
Yeah. So I kept noticing moments in the book where there were different objects that were assigned this kind of value. I'm sort of flipping through now. I'm sure it was on one of those Uno pages, but it was the pralines.
Oh, yeah.
I found that kind of so touching. So obviously your father and your brother worked with prisoners in Angola prison who were on death row, which strangely my sister Jackie, who also lives in New Orleans in the 7th Ward, does as well, in a different capacity through her artwork, which is another strange connection we have. In fact, I make an appearance in this book on page 100, which I'm gonna get to that. I have a bone to pick, but at one point you're talking about you get this letter from, on page 193. I'm jumping ahead. Letter from a death row inmate after your father passes away, and we go into this whole passage about pralines. I think it's on page 114 actually. Do you have that? You mind reading that?
Yeah. So we're having lunch at death row because that's what you do when you go to death row. They give you the first thing when you walk in. You've got to go through all this stuff to get there. It's this whole kind of ordeal because Angola is huge. It's about 5,000 men. I can't remember. It's like 13,000 acres. It's the biggest maximum security prison in the country, and it's still got a camp system where it's like Camp C, Camp B, Camp, and all these different camps, and they work the fields, and that's why it's also called the farm. And it was used to be a plantation called Angola that was for like slave breeding. It's a really intense place because there's so much history built up in that one spot. And so we're just eating lunch because you walk in, I want you to go through all the things you have to do to get into death row, and they hand you a menu, and you have to choose, like what you want for the menu, and there's inmates who make it, and the food's actually really good. It's really, really fresh, and so we were talking. I was talking with it was my brother's client that I was talking to, and he was just talking about what they eat, and he said during their single daily hour out of their cells, some guys had figured out how to do a little improvisational cooking in the microwave they had access to. He walked me through a fellow inmate's recipe for death row pralines: a half-full jar of peanut butter, water, a microwave, a plastic spoon, and whatever preferred candy is available from the vending machine. I understood that inmates desired to attempt to recreate a praline. Just seeing them in their little baskets next to the register at the drugstore, hardware store, traffic court, a side enterprise for the cashier. Like literally, there's a cashier at the traffic court who just sells pralines along with taking your money for your tickets. Evokes a convulsion of desire. The simplicity of the ingredients, sugar, butter, and pecans, yielding something almost too good to bear. I used to work across the street from Aunt Sally's praline factory near the river, and when their vats were bubbling and the coffee plant a few blocks away was roasting, the neighborhood smelled like the world's largest continental breakfast, and I couldn't believe my good fortune to spend my days in such a place. But such concentrated delight has a particular relationship to heartbreak. Shortly after Katrina, I befriended a Creole grandfather during drop-off at our kids' school. Many mornings he would talk to me about his praline business that it was just getting going before the storm. In a repetitive, abstracted loop many older folks were stuck in during that time, struggling to move forward, the gears always slipping. He had just made some big deals with a few downtown hotels when his kitchen flooded and everything fell apart. One day he brought me a small, wilted, flattened box, cheerily printed with his company's logo, never to be assembled and never to be filled with what he claimed were the best pralines in the city. Did he present the box to me as evidence, as emblem? I wasn't sure. Later, I noticed a drift of hundreds more empty packages in the back of his car, next to his grandbaby's car seat. And then there's another praline encounter that happens, but...
Yeah, it's just, I mean, this book sort of, the way that this book moves, I find fascinating. Like, you're covering so much ground because it's all tied together through memory and through experience, and one thing's calling up another thing, which calls up your father and his work doing that. And I was really touched by sort of how you found out why he did that work. And maybe, I'm not sure we want to discuss that. You might want to leave that for them to figure.
For the book?
For the book.
For the book.
But I sort of had the similar things with my sister and her work, and sort of how she's working with people who she has, on the surface, nothing in common with, but comes to grow to care about these people deeply. And I, as a writer, always sort of struggled with this a little bit, and I think I mentioned it to you over at the other bar. I'm sitting here. My sister's doing this work where she's helping a guy who's been locked in a 6-by-9 foot cell for 35 years with an hour a week outside. In this case, he was convicted of a crime he hadn't even committed, and even the widow was saying that much. I mean, it's horrendous. And it's tremendously important work with real-world, tangible effects. I mean, he actually got out of prison, but he had terminal cancer. He died 36 hours after getting out. This is Herman Wallace, one of the Angola Three. And you go like, God, what amazing work. I'm writing a story about the time I fingered that girl in high school in that book. You know what I mean? Like, and I go, is this fucking matter? You know what I mean? What am I doing here? I mean, and do you ever struggle with anything? No, you don't.
No. I do because I always have this sense that it's not enough. That like writing is not enough. I think that's why I continue to teach, because I feel like it's like, oh, at least then I'm making this tangible difference in other people's lives. But I always have this like suspicion that writing's not quite enough in terms of like what I'm giving to the world. But I mean, then again, like, but your sister, there's something in your sister that draws her to that sort of work, just like there's something in my brother and my father that drew them to that kind of work. And I think we just have to kind of like follow what we're good at. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And there's that passage about sort of you end up in streams, pulled into streams, and there are the... Is that something that you wanted to read? Oh,
the stillborn, that's such a funny... I mean, it's a kind of horrifying passage, but
it is kind of horrifying, but it's kind of amazing.
God, where is that? Oh, yeah, that Louis Pasteur, the biographer. This goes back to the Kessler, the act of creation. And because I had this weird thing when I was looking at my dad's obituary, and right next to his obituary, there was this other story about this guy. And my dad, had some kind of like social prominence or civic prominence, and so they'd done one of those obituaries. It's actually like an article. But right next to it was another article, right next to it, like same length, about this body that had been found at the bottom of an elevator shaft in this Katrina-damaged hotel out in New Orleans East. And there were these weird, I was looking at both of them right next to each other, and I was like, God, there were these kind of like weird parallels. And I just thought it was interesting that like both of them, like Dad had a very had a public life, and he died surrounded. He was a patriarch, died surrounded by his family, and he was this guy who died at the bottom alone for like probably trapped for days at the bottom of an elevator shaft in this ruined hotel. And I was like, God, like in some ways, like you never know what direction your life is gonna be. And I thought about the Kessler quote from the very end of it's like at the very end of this like 700-page brick. I didn't read the whole thing. I just flipped to the last page because I was wondering how Kessler is going to finish this monster. And in that section, he discusses the fluidity of genius, specifically regarding scientists and the role that accident and happenstance played in their paths towards major history-diverting discoveries. Apparently, Pasteur's notebooks were full of projects and nascent discoveries that neither time nor circumstance allowed him to pursue. But had events or relationships or whims been differently aligned for Pasteur, suggests his biographer, there might have been a totally different outcome for humanity. And this is the quote that got me. And this is the quote from the Pasteur biography. It is often by trivial, even accidental decision that we direct our activities into a certain channel. Usually we know nothing of the ultimate orientation or of the outlet towards which we travel. And the stream sweeps us into a formula of life from which there is no returning. Every decision is like a murder, and our march forward is over the stillborn bodies of all of our possible selves that will never be. And just, I know, it's so outrageous. Like every decision is like a murder. March forward over these stillborn bodies of all of our possible selves will never be. And so I kind of saw that guy at the, because Dad had a lot of weaknesses too. I was like, he could, like who knows? Like you could be that could be a possible self that you have to step over.
Well, I feel like that about all my decisions. In fact, after my book came out and I was sort of spiraling out, and people were like, "What are you working on now?" And I was like, "My mental health." And I went to my therapist and was like, "I don't know, I'm fucking indecisive. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't really have the ability to like sort of send myself off in like certain directions and willfully." And what did he say to me? He was just like, "Well, every decision is. I mean, every decision is a loss. You have to. You're putting one thing to bed. You're not going to do that thing, and so you have to sort of. You're never going to win when you make a decision."
Right.
I was like, "Oh fuck."
Yeah.
That's fucking depressing.
But calling it like a murder, like every decision is a murder, and we have to step over the bodies of our stillborn selves.
Oh, brutal.
Yeah.
So we might as well jump to this thing where I don't know if this is a slight. In May, the Dark Wood. This is when we first met, and I had just lucked into a story in the Paris Review, and my sister had like set up this elaborate plan. She was like, "Matt, they want to fly you out to New Orleans to do this reading. They're gonna pay for it," and I was like, "Yeah, cool, yeah, definitely, I'll fucking do it." And well, I guess I'll just read what your account of it. We had decided to have a sort of undercover ECRG meeting at a public event. I was already taking part in a reading organized by Nate, and what I read would constitute that next month's text, secretly dedicated to the group, most of whom would be in attendance. I was reading with a hot young fiction writer who had just published a story in a fancy literary magazine and was getting a lot of buzz, and a writer from Mexico City who was nervous because he'd never read in English in public before and drank Jamesons from a shiny, elegant flask, which flashed in the jury-rigged work lights whenever he tipped it back. Was that a slight? Did Ben George make you... I don't know. I feel like there's a little bit of a hot young fiction writer.
Well, it was because later the reason that I included, because it was so funny later when after the reading I was like, "Oh, I just read that thing about you in the Paris Review, like hot young writer to look out for," and you were just like, "I'm not even that young," and
yeah.
And you were just and you were being really kind of self-deprecating about it, which I tried to do later in the chapter.
You did?
Yeah. I guess it was kind of no, it wasn't a dig.
Jab. Okay, good.
I mean, because that's the way that the evening kind of was balanced up. There was like Yuri, like we all have our roles, right?
Right.
Like your role was like hot young fiction writer, just got published in the Paris Review, coming down and like headlining. And Yuri was like nervous Mexican writer who had never read in public before.
He was like a huge.
Oh, now he's like enormous.
Yeah.
Yuri Herrera. He's
like,
incredible.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad we cleared that up. But
Okay.
so the other story that comes after that is that that was all an elaborate prank by my sister, who also didn't like what I was writing. I had written a story called Punching Jackie. My sister's name is Jackie, and so she had for months planned this show. She's an artist, so she was like, "Come on down, do this reading." And by the way, I'm going to have an art show opening that weekend. Don't even worry about it. But it'll be cool. It'll be like a Sumell weekend. And so I did the reading, and she convinced me to read Punching Jackie. And then the next night was the opening of her show, which was called Punching Matt Back.
Yeah. And you didn't know that was...
I had no idea.
Yeah.
I was just coming down on like my high, like, yeah, I'm a hot shot, yeah.
See? Hot shot.
Yeah. And then, yeah, she really schooled me with that. Mm-hmm. But that sort of goes back to like writing things that maybe your family's uncomfortable with. Mm-hmm. And sort of how do you navigate that? And it's really hard, and I was wondering if there's anything other than maybe your father's passing that sort of gave you the permission to tackle some of these really difficult subjects, these really personal subjects and family-related subjects.
Well, I think I gave the book to all of my siblings to read, and everybody said, even though they were a little uncomfortable with some of the more like intimate stuff concerning my younger sisters who died. Everyone, said that they were cool with it, and then later some of them took it back and said they weren't actually cool with some of it after they had already said that they were, like that sort of thing happened.
Yeah.
But I think, honestly, for me, like the main permission was that my mom was fine with it, and she read it, and she was extremely, extremely supportive, even though it was really, really difficult for her because there was a lot of stuff that she didn't know that was in the book that was kind of a revelation to her,
right.
Which she found, it was hard for her, but we had a lot of discussions throughout the 2 years that I was working on it about it, and so I think that was kind of the main point of permission because she felt so isolated. During the time when she was a religion teacher and she had her two youngest kids committed suicide, and she felt like that she had kind of lost her moral authority to teach. She quit teaching, which she loved, and she was an amazing teacher, and she felt so isolated by the experience. And I think through talking through things in the book with her and her reading the book and the kind of connections that other people are feeling with the book, for her, it seemed like a relief because there was this kind of silence around it was broken,
Right.
So that was, for me, that was kind of the biggest permission, I think.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense, too, that, certainly my sister was, totally fine with it when I first wrote the story. Mm-hmm. And then when it got published, was less fine with it.
Yeah, that's when there was some pushback the closer it got to publication.
Yeah, that's when it seems to happen.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can take some questions. There was so much more. There's so much more that this is a really, truly, it's a special book. And I found it really tremendously touching and well done and funny and great. So thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for taking the time.
Oh, my God. Thank you for having me. But we're going to open it up. Does anyone have some questions in the audience that you have for Anne? Or for me? But mostly Anne.
Just now I'm beginning to see a body of literature emerge about family members who remain after suicide. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know enough about it to really get a feel for where that work can go. Mm-hmm. But because we are sort of left hanging at that spot, is there anything you can tell us that is for people, for that frontier, that last decorum of silence that
mm-hmm.
used to be lodged there as that territory that no one ever had to examine, mm-hmm. and how as a writer you dig into that. And I also wanted to know what Project Object was.
Project Object, it's an online, I'll start with the easy question first. It's an online project that Rob Walker, and I can't remember who writes for the New York Times, and another person do where they'll have a specific type of object, like a fetish or something like that, and then just have a writer write like 500 words about it or something like that, and it's all posted online. And there's a wide array of writers who have done it, and I did one for that.
Did they do that for charity? Did they auction them off or something?
Well, they donated the money. There's like merch, and I didn't take an honorarium. I donated my honorarium to the ACLU, and so it's to raise money for the ACLU and other places.
I find that interesting because so much of contemporary fiction examines the Gothic resonance of objects or even furniture, and what emotions objects can portend in a room, and how objects are written about as having a real point of view in contemporary literature. I find that very interesting.
Yeah.
To talk about objects. So tell us about going into something that people have never written about.
Well, I mean, honestly, I was telling you this earlier that I didn't. The first version of this book was very, very different. It didn't have a lot of the personal stuff in it. I didn't talk that much about my sisters at all. I think still that taboo that my dad had put down was still kind of clinging to me a little bit, and I still was very, very reluctant to do that. And my editor read it, and he's like, "You're just totally dancing it around," because I never wanted to write memoir ever. I would do a lot of I hate the word like literary journalism or whatever, or personal essays and everything, but I'd never wanted to do memoir ever. And then the more he kept pushing on it, he's like, "Well, what about here and what about here?" It's like, you really need to do this. And I was like, damn it. It's like, all right. And I just remember I just kind of like gave into it. I was like, okay, you want me to do this? It's like, and I almost took it as a challenge, and I was like, oh, I'll freaking do it. And then that's when I remember writing that scene in the belly of the whale where when we went to my sister's house after she had done it. We had to go back. We broke into the house to retrieve some videotapes because we thought that there were some things like some sex tapes or something, and so we broke in, and it was this kind of detailed thing of what we saw when we went in there, and I just remember this feeling of going deeper into it. It's like, oh, okay, you want me to explore this? I'll explore it. This is what we found, this is what we felt, this is what we saw, and then I realized that's kind of where I needed to go. Which I needed to do was just examine the memory of it as best I could, and I think it did have. I hate it's being billed as healing memoir and stuff like that, which makes me feel uncomfortable because, I don't feel like a healed person. Yeah. You know what I mean? Uh-huh. But I certainly did get through this experience. I understood it so much more by writing about it, and so I don't even know that. I don't know what to get back to the question again about what.
I appreciate the riffing. And I want to thank you for sticking with the context of the book, because so often you get into these things and it's just how do you define art? It's worthless, and this was really a good discussion. So I want to thank you for moderating that, because most people don't have any clue what's interesting up there, and you really did dive in well. But why I asked the question is that a friend of mine wrote, one of the most brilliant, melancholy people I know, about depression. He just wrote about depression. And then he wrote at the end, but I've never had the desire to kill myself. I've always been entertained by my thoughts. And I realized it's so weird that depression and suicide could be detached like that. And I started to think, maybe not all depression leads to suicide. And what is suicide? And I just think it's a really worthy discussion to have right now, of just bringing it out in the open. So, because I think there are so many assumptions about suicide people have, and about the survivors, that need to be talked about. And I think we're going to get someplace with it, talking about it.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. Suicide is something that people have been thinking about on abstract level for thousands of years. That's kind of been the major kind of philosophical question, is whether or not to kill yourself. If you have the option, and we're all born with the knowledge of our own deaths, and we have to kind of we're expected to carry on anyway, why not just kind of take agency and just do it. But of course, most of the people we know who've done it, and some of us unfortunately know a lot of people who've done it, there's not a lot of consistency from story to story. There's a lot of mystery, and it never seems to be some kind of philosophical act. It always comes out of a place of like loss of control and confusion, and you know what I mean.
To talk about the detachment, though, did we bring up the smiley face?
Oh yeah, the smiley faces on the suicide notes. Yeah. But that's like a thing. I mean, that is one of the things that I found, like, in talking to other people. I mean, that's the reason I think it is important to talk about these kinds of things, because sometimes you do see commonalities. Like, that's actually a thing. Like, one of my sisters did put like smiley faces. Like, she had told herself this story that she would believe that like her son would be better off without her, that we would all be better off without her, and everything, and had like put like smiley faces on all these notes. And I was like, what? And then I was talking with the woman later who told me that, and her husband had committed suicide, and husband, very successful banker, just out of nowhere did it. I guess he had some deal or something that went wrong. He did not deal with it, and he put smiley faces on his suicide notes. And so there was that sense of detachment that allows you to actually do that thing, to like lay down in front of the train, or like jump off the bridge. Like, there has to be kind of a sense of detachment from yourself and your pain too. I mean, I guess, I don't know. Like I said, this is so much speculation.
And what if that dematerialization doesn't come from depression? That's what's that's what's ringing in my ears. Is that you have to detach from the material plane. Mm-hmm. But if you're doing a happy face, maybe you're not depressed.
Yeah.
And what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you had also with your other sister, maybe it was Susan, or she was suspiciously happy.
Oh yeah.
Which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, because you always get the feeling that she was kind of hiding something.
Right. When someone's always like really jolly.
Yeah, and that there's like stuff going on in their lives, but they're still like, they have that mask.
Yeah.
That you have that impenetrable mask that you can't get to. Yeah.
Well, I have all that doubt.
Yeah.
Healthy skeptic. Anybody else? Questions? Yes.
Where do you perform the bulk of your writing, like in a physical sense, and where did you come to the conclusion that that's the best place to do your art?
I'm so lucky. I have this studio down in. It's in another parish. It's only about 5 minutes from my house, but it's great because it's in this very cheap area. It's called St. Bernard Parish, and it's on top of it's in a strip mall, and it's above a discount liquor store. And I have to cross the parish line, even though it's really, really close to my house. I have to cross the parish line. I have to go over the industrial canal. I have to go over this old, like, rusty drawbridge. You know what I'm talking about? On St. Claude, when you go all the way down. Mm-hmm. And it's a totally different neighborhood. It's a totally different place, and it's a totally different space. And so I think, because of what we're talking about, like, you've got a crowded life, a crowded domestic life. I can kind of enter this space where the only thing I do in that space is write. And so, since I have such little time to do it, I have to have a place where I just go in, sit down, write for a couple hours, and then leave. Like, that's the only thing that happens in that space.
Do you have Wi-Fi in that space?
Nope, no Wi-Fi. No Wi-Fi.
Smart.
Yeah, and I leave my phone in the car under the seat. I have to hide it from myself. And then just go up and like write for a few hours and then leave. But for me, it depends on. Some people can like sit at their kitchen table with all kinds of stuff going on and write brilliant stuff. Mm-hmm. But I need to have that detachment and a dedicated space.
Me too, and I also you have to like descend down into it, sort of like we were saying. I need quiet time, and like it was weird. Like with my ex, she'd like be sleeping, and I would be annoyed that she was in the space, like while I was trying to work. I'm like, hey, you gotta get up. You gotta get the fuck out of here. I hear you breathing over there. It's distracting. So I don't know.
Why did you guys break up?
Yeah, right. Anybody else? Questions? Yes.
What if your dad could read your book from beginning to end? What do you think his reaction would be?
That's a good question. Someone else asked me. I think he'd be. I think first he'd be really, really pissed because he was a patriarch, authoritarian kind of. There were 8 of us, and so he had to lay down the law. Like that was just a way of keeping some kind of semblance of order. And so I think he would be kind of pissed that I disobeyed him. I think in the end he'd be. I think, proud that it came out. I mean, it's this kind of weird thing that the only thing that made this book possible was him dying, which is kind of a sucky way to get a book out into the world, you know what I mean? But right before he died, I had these 3 magazine pieces come out in 3 different magazines, and I brought him to his hospital bed, and he was so proud. He was like showing the nurses and everything, and he was like, God, he's like, you're such a good writer. He said, you should be like much better known than you are. And so that's the other kind of irony, is that was like one of the last conversations I had with him, was him being really proud of my writing and where I had taken it. And so I think he would probably, like most things, have a pretty complicated reaction to it.
Are you guys Catholic?
Yes. Yep.
Anybody else?
I was just going to ask, is the existential crisis reading group still operating, and do you feel like other members of it have experienced, I don't know, changes or any kind of awakenings because of it?
It's a good question. I think the fact that we still have this core group that's so like passionately attached to it. So yes, we are still meeting. We're like in our 5th year of doing it, and some people move away, or or quit in a huff. But yeah, so we have a passionate core group who like really depend on it, and so I think that that kind of dependence and the idea of really wanting to keep it going, I think that maybe shows that I don't know if there's any kind of like revelations, but I know like we've developed almost this like secret thing. Like when we talk about the tragic and trivial plane, like we all know what each other's talking about, because we've all discussed this stuff together. And so when it comes up in conversations, like that it's sticking in people's lives in positive ways, hopefully.
Who are the nonfiction literary writers that just in terms of craft?
I think in terms of craft, I finally just read Mary Carr's Lit, and I just wanted to like rewrite the whole book. I was like, oh Jesus! Like right when my book came out, I was like, man. But I guess it was good that I didn't read it while I was writing it, because I was just like, damn it. Because she's really amazing in terms of the memoir and stuff. It's almost like too good. When you read something, you're like, come on, let it up for. Like, does every sentence have to be like over the top fantastic? But so Mary Carr and that Helen Macdonald, that H is for Hawk book, that was another book that was just kind of bowled over
Gonna bring that up, yeah.
by the virtuosity of that book, and it was almost like too much. I was like, come on, really? And yeah, but other nonfiction writers like John Sullivan, you probably know him from Wilmington, yeah.
J.J. Sullivan, he's great. He was just out here, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
Thank you.
thanks so much. Thank you.
And big thanks to
Thanks,
Skylight
Matt.
for
Yeah.
hosting. You should buy these books, her book, and...
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.